Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin that clings so closely. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. We have a great cloud of witnesses that are passing the baton to us. We have a race set before us. Let's fix our eyes on him and run the race.
Hello, we're Dave and Evelyn Brown, and we wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened at our beginning 60 years ago. In 1956, this church was started through a donation from the Lynn family in Long Beach with the stipulation that we establish a church here. They wanted to reach all the people and the families in this area for Christ. We had to have everybody doing some jobs in those days. We all had work for the Lord that we could do. I served as a deacon and an elder and chairman of the missions committee and a treasurer, among other things.
Also, I drove the bus. We bought a church bus, and at a 1957 church bus, 37 bus. It was old and shifted and everything, and I drove it for Daily Vacation Bible School.
We at that time, we didn't feel like this was a sacrifice because all of us were sort of on fire for the Lord, and we didn't mind these different things. To start with, we started meeting, and our first meetings were in the farmhouse of the Lynns, and from there we went to the barn. And also we had Bible study down in the chicken coops. Now it didn't rain too much in California here, but on the days it did rain, we had to move the pulpit sometimes because of a leaky roof. Another problem was flies. We had flies continually over here because of the nearness of the dairy farms.
Also that we dressed, the women would dress real nice to go to church, high heels and everything, but we end up getting into the sand and getting our shoes full with sand, and it became a problem. Cars.
The early church had problems too. Now, we had some problems, but our people were pretty committed, and they worked. They had a lot of cooperation, and they managed to work through these things. Anyway, Fellowship Hall was opened in the 1950s, and that was a real joy. We had picnics under the pepper tree, and also we had a paved parking lot, so that really helped. The first phase of the main building was completed. L.B. Hall was the general contractor there, and he was also the general contractor on the educational building. And we really owe a debt of gratitude for the work that he did here. Knott Avenue has always been family-oriented, and families living together and worshiping together. And my wife and I raised 3 sons here, Robert, Jack, and Bennett. And these 3 guys were all baptized here, and they were married here. And their spouses were all members of the church, and they're still together.
We're pleased to have Dave and Evelyn Brown and some of their family here tonight. But we also have another charter member, Fran Fields. And so would Dave and Evelyn please stand? And Fran Fields, if you would also stand, and let's give them a rounding. There's the Browns. Thank you so much for being a pillar of strength to our community and helping Knott Avenue get its feet off the ground. I was slightly wet, but you know, some churches pride themselves in snooty terms like vestibule and the chapel of, we talk about the barn and the chicken coop with fondness. At this time, I'd like to ask if you are a former staff member, a former elder or deacon, or a former employee of Knott Avenue Christian Church, and you're here tonight to help us celebrate these 60 years, would you please stand? We'd like to recognize you. We're now going to hear from a young man. Well, it's not so much of a young man, but it was a little boy, a young boy growing up around Knott Avenue. And Ken Lamont, the pastor of Newberry Park Christian Church, is going to come and share with us some of his recollections about growing up being a young lad here at Knott Avenue. Ken, thank you for coming and sharing with us tonight.
Absolutely. Well, it is an honor to be here, and I cannot believe how much trouble I caused when I was a kid here. But Ron, he was able to lasso me, and one of my greatest memories was Ron baptizing me, and Joe Vaughn was the first face I saw after I was baptized. You know, one of my greatest memories of this place, this really was the birthplace of my faith. And but I was just too busy to sit still. So there are always things that I was busy doing. And I remember this building when it only went that way. And one of our goals with a couple of friends of mine was always to climb to the top of this building and slide down. And right over here where they pushed the walls out, there was a kind of a patio top. You might remember the patio covering over here. Well, the dumbest thing is that the day we actually mustered up the courage to try it, a few of us started to decide to climb the building, to climb the roof. But the dumb thing was we did it during service. And so I guess our fathers heard us, and we got, I don't know how far up, and slid down and tumbled out onto the thing. And when we got over to the edge of the patio, we looked over the edge, and there was my dad and Carl Dupre and Steve Hunter and some others looking at us as if we were already dead. And I remember climbing down off of there. My dad pulled me aside and he said, hey, and Carl Dupre stepped in front. Praise the Lord for Carl. And Carl said, Dennis, but before you kill him, let me go around with him. And what Carl did was he walked me to Tasty Freeze. And he looked me in the eye and he says, Ken, if you have enough creativity to get into this kind of trouble, oh, what a pastor you'll be someday. And I have to tell you that voice rang in my ear until the day I was ordained. And that same chicken coop that was out here, you know, my dad was one of the elders, and all of the elders used to bring their sons. It seemed like just the thing to do, and we'd always bring our baseball mitts with us. And we'd be playing out at Orangeview Junior High at the time. And then we thought, well, our dads had been going too long in their elders meeting, and so we came in from the field, and we started to look for the dads, and they were in the chicken coop. And the chicken coop had these little slatted windows, and we started to peer into these little windows. And what I saw inside is something that stuck with me for the rest of my life, was this group of men on their knees. And I have to tell you, that indelibly was burned into my mind and into my life, because I thought that is what leaders in the church do. They get on their knees often, and they remember to seek the Lord. And so today I'm a pastor up in the Thousand Oaks area, and this place holds incredible memories for me that really launched my faith and helped me to be able to develop into a pastor today that I am sure most of the Sunday school teachers I had never thought would happen. So thank you, Knott Avenue, for all that you have done for guys like me who weren't sure what we were going to do with all that energy, but you funneled us into God's direction and gave us a trajectory that is now reaping benefits. So thank you to Knott Avenue.
You're the man. During this early 70s, Knott Avenue experienced a huge growth spurt. In fact, it was running around 400, and under the leadership of Rich Marshall, the church over doubled from over 400 to over 800. Great things were happening, and Rich has a greeting for us tonight.
Well, greetings, Knott Avenue Christian Church, and congratulations on 60 years of spreading the good news of Jesus. This is Rich Marshall coming to you from Castle Rock, Colorado, where Wilma and I live now. I'm sure that some of you don't remember me, but we had 7 good ministry years from 1970 to 1977 at Knott Avenue. Great years for the church and surely good years for us as we learned how to grow in ministry. In fact, I would have to say to you, Knott Avenue, thank you. You allowed me to learn how to preach while I was there. When I came to Knott Avenue, I thought I was going to be the youth pastor and ended up being the senior minister and had to learn how to preach, and you helped me to do that, so thank you very much. We've been able to carry that on now for the last number of years, over 50 years now, and the message of Jesus has gone to 54 countries because God has led us to those places with his message. We think right now of Knott Avenue because of the fact that when we came there, it was just Wilma and I and our son, Rich. Our daughter Valerie was born there. We now have 6 grandchildren. 4 of them, incidentally, are in college back in California, 1 in the Navy, and then a little adopted granddaughter from China, just turning 11 years old this weekend. So our family has grown as the church has grown. Greetings to you again, and let me just say this, the next 60 years should be even greater than the last 60 years. We're believing that for you, we're praying that for you, and surely look forward to seeing some of you in the near future. I was able to connect with some at the North American Christian Convention this summer in Anaheim, had great visits with Ron and Tamara there, had good visits with Stan and Connie Endicott there, and of course with many of you from the church who were at the convention. So good to see you. God bless you, and may God make your next 60 years even greater than the last 60.
Some of you have wondered, how in the world did Knott Avenue get stuck with Ron Gallagher? If you want to blame somebody, blame Rich Marshall. He came as a youth minister. If he'd have stayed the youth minister, I wouldn't have come, and the rest would have been history. But he got hired as a senior pastor. They had to hire somebody that was available and cheap, and you get what you pay for. So this year, we celebrate an anniversary for another quality, first-rate organization on our property, Knott Avenue Christian Church Preschool. And 40 years ago, this year, we finished what used to be called the Christian Education Building. And the leadership of the church had the wisdom and the vision to launch a preschool. Betty Spencer was our first director. Our second director was Betsy Slauson, and Betsy's here tonight. And Betsy, would you stand, along with our current director, April Garcia. Would April and Betsy please stand? I'll often be shopping someplace and I'll see this big old good-looking guy walk up to my wife and say something to her, and later I'll say, "Who was that?" She said, "Oh, he was in my preschool class." I go, "Yeah, sure." But that's what it's all about, isn't it? Helping kids to get excited about Jesus Christ, and Knott Avenue's always done a great job with that. Think back about when you were in junior high school. Can you remember that time? Your body was growing, your voice was changing, your face was exploding a little bit. And then all of a sudden you're living in the middle of the United States, in Illinois, going to a small Christian school, and your dad comes in and says, "Honey, we're moving to California." That was Kim Strader Hamilton, but Kim Strader at the time. Kim came to California in the middle of what is a difficult time anyway, and had to make new friends and a new church. And Kim, come and share with us how God worked in your life to make a difference.
Well, one of the things that made a big difference was one of the first people I met was Ron. The first plane ride I ever took in my life was to come out here with Mom and Dad when they said we're thinking about moving, and they brought me along, and we had this nice little meal over in the fellowship hall, and Ron put his arm around me and he said, if you move to California, you probably should not wear polyester anymore. Do you remember that?
But I don't think so.
Oh, he has no idea how that helped my life. Because moving when you're 12 years old from Springfield, Illinois to Anaheim, California, with your sister and your brother staying back in the Midwest, they were in college. My sister Debbie was in college. My brother had a job. And so Mom and Dad and I and our dog moved to California. And I had braces, exactly like you're saying. I looked exactly like you just said. I had braces, I had a little short boy haircut, and I wore polyester. And I went to La Palma Junior High School, and Sandy Carter was one of my first friends. Oh, one of my first friends, because my eyes were about this big the first few weeks I was at school. I had never seen something like California before. But you know, first of all, my mom is here tonight. Mom is with me. Would you stand up, Mom? Come on. Mom and Dad like to build things. Every house we ever lived in, they gutted the whole thing and they started from scratch and created a home that we loved and we enjoyed the whole time we lived there. And when Dad said we were moving to California, it was the same thing. He wanted to build something. He wanted to have an adventure. He wanted to try something new, so off we came. And you know, the thing that held me together, that held me solidly with the Lord, was Knott Avenue. My family was here. The youth group at the time was led by Mike Fields, who was an amazing youth pastor. My youth sponsors were the Dupreys and the Slossons. You can't get much better than that. Off we went to Yosemite. We went swimming in their pool all the time. We were at church almost every day. And then comes Chuck Boer on the scene that drove us in that church bus all over Southern California. And I don't know, by the grace of God, how we stayed alive, because he always faced the back of the bus while he's driving, talking to us. Always. There was always conversation. There was always growth. There was always him pushing us to think about who we were and what we were going to do with our life. We were just talking about that tonight, actually, how back then we were at church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday morning breakfast. We were there because we had a hunger after God. And looking back, a lot of those kids that we were in youth group with are now in ministry, now in missionary work, and they're all over the world. And it was such an exciting, fun, beautiful place to be. I brought a few pictures tonight just to show you. Number one, this is what Knott Avenue looked like one of the first Sundays that we were here, and that is Stand Endicott right in the middle there. You might enjoy that. The second one is the amazing church staff that Dad had when he started. That would be Mike Fields with the blonde hair. Again, there's Stan. And Dad at the bottom, and Lauren Hancock as well joining him. And they were a killer staff, lean and mean. And then an outreach singing group, Jeannie Fields led it. And boy, did we think who we were. We got to go to churches all over the place, and they listened to us, which was amazing because it built our self-esteem. It helped us become great musicians, and it was really fun. And the choir here was always such a big part. When I was at Knott Avenue, finding your gift set was something Dad loved, helping people find what they were gifted at, what their passions were, and go off and do them. And there were many places to jump in and be involved, and the choir was just one of them. But I got to do a retreat with your ladies about a month ago, and I had a picture taken with these stellar women, these women of faith, that I could look into every one of their eyes and think, I'm so grateful that you poured yourself into my life, because I am what I am today because of you and because of Knott Avenue, and I'm so thankful. And I just want to say congratulations, Knott Avenue. We're praying for so much more in the future still to come. God bless you.
Thanks, Kim. Kim's dad was the appropriate, always doing the right thing type pastor, unlike many of his staff. Floyd just sort of sometimes would just shake his head and say, well, he wouldn't say it. But one thing that Floyd knew was that young people needed energy and wild and crazy people. And so the King of Wingtips hired a wild and crazy guy who is now the pastor of Crossroads Christian Church in Corona, a thriving, dynamic, impactful church in Corona, Chuck Boer. And Chuck's going to come and share with us about what God was doing in the youth group while he was there. Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, Rod. You too. Well, I have to say, without a doubt, for Pam and I, some of the best years of our life were here at Knott Avenue, in big part because of Floyd, who just literally turned me loose and set me free. And at times he'd shake his head and redirect me, but he really, really was for it. And I'll never forget, I made a pretty radical move back then. We decided to cancel all fun and games. We would have a youth ministry with no fun and games. There was just going to be Bible study, prayer, and Bible study, prayer, and church. And so I remember I announced that to the youth group. I said, come to our house on Monday night, an hour and a half of Bible study. And I thought, I don't know who's going to show up. The first person to walk in the door was Sandy Hunter. And there she is right there. And she just came in so excited. And then Kim came in, I think, second. And I'll never forget just how excited she was. Then a guy named Dave Sill showed up third. And we had 8 people show up that night. And I thought, this is the best thing ever. And a year and a half later, we could not find a house big enough to hold all the students who wanted to come and just hear God's word. I got to tell you, we had rules for that study. There were 4 rules. Number 1, you couldn't come if you didn't bring a Bible. Number 2, you had to pray out loud. Number 3, you had to always give the answer to the question that was asked. You could never say, I don't know. And so that was a big, big deal. And then, so we really had those kind of in-depth rules set for anybody who was going to be a part of it. And one night there was a knock at the door, and I opened it, and the Western High School song leading group was there, and only one of them was a Christian. And I looked at them and said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, we want to come to the Bible study. And I said, okay, but do you know there's rules? And May Lynn, who was the head of the song leading group, then looked at me and she said, yeah, you got to have a Bible. I have a Bible. You can't talk about anything out of the subject. We won't. You have to be willing to pray out loud. And she wasn't even a Christian. Then she goes, I'll pray out loud. I don't care. Call on me first. And she said, we can't talk about anything other than the subject. And I found out something back then. I found out something that's true today. Non-Christians are hungering for God's word. And those girls, every single one of them gave their life to Christ. And we began to watch a revival happen that just blew our mind. And that was just an epitome of what occurred here because this church wanted to reach the next generation. This church wanted to be a part of that no matter what it took and what it cost. And so what happened is we watched this church begin to grow. And then I don't know how meaningful this will be to some of you, but then we hit that moment of moments that I got to walk into Floyd's office, and Dave Krause will probably remember this. And I said, Floyd, I have some good news for you. And he said, what is it? And I said, we're going to be bringing more students to Angeles Christian Camp than Eastside Christian Churches this year. And I got a raise. It was, do you remember those days? It was really fun and competitive, and Les Christie was my mentor, and it just ate him alive that we beat him. But there was such a heart for God here. There was such a freedom to minister here. There was such a desire just to ask what God wanted. And I think that for me anyway, Floyd said that. Betty, you know how he would just always, in the end, not want what he wanted what God wanted. And so there were times that I just watched him at times make a decision on his own to say, you know what, that's what we're going to do. And this may seem radical, but back then we instituted something at baptism called applause at baptism. Does anybody remember that was a big deal? And Floyd stood up and said, you know why some of you get mad about that? Because it makes you stay till the service is over. Great, great times, though.
Chuck, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us, and we appreciate that. Not too awfully long ago, Knott Avenue launched a church, Oasis. Woo! All right, they're here tonight. Good support. We reluctantly released a guy that had great passion for missions from our staff to be the founding pastor of that church, Mike Carmen. So Mike, come and share with us. Thank you, buddy.
Well, you've heard already how Knott Avenue in its history was producing strong and powerful leaders, men and women who knew that part of their job was to invest who they were in the lives of those who were coming behind them, younger men and women who would grow up to take their place as the next generation of leaders here at Knott Avenue. You've heard that people like Rich and Floyd and Chuck invested their time, invested their lives in those kind of people and left their mark, their imprint on them as they grew in their faith. Well, tonight we have two of those men, young men. That's good, huh? Young men, huh? Two of those young men with us, Steve Hunter and Dave Kraus. And we asked them to come because their lives, so much of their lives and their leadership can be traced back to who filled them, who invested in them, who poured into them. And they want to share some of those things with you right now.
Well, neither do we, because we're dressed as visitors where everybody else is dressed up, you know. Okay. It's so exciting to be here, and Knott Avenue has had such a big impact on our life. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about how God really uses community to shape us. And I would say that that's true of how God used Knott Avenue in my life. You know, one of the people that I think of is Carl Dupre, and he's been mentioned a number of times. And I think about how welcoming and how loving he was for us, you know, as kids coming through, and just seeing a godly man and how he worked with his sons and knowing Brad so well and being over at the house so many times. When we got married, when Sherry and I were married and we moved away, then coming back and visiting here at Knott Avenue, Carl Dupre would always make it a point to come by and check in with me. But the thing that he always left with is he always said, "Steve, I love you and I'm proud of you." And the timing of that was always God's timing, because I needed that at that moment. Ron, I don't know if you remember, but there was a phone call that you made to me. I think it was on a Friday, and I had actually taken that day off. And Ron had called and said, "Hey, Steve, I need you to help me out. I am double booked on Sunday, and would you mind teaching a class?" And ironically, it happened to be the class that my parents were in, and my in-laws, and all of their friends. And as he was asking that question, I was praying, "Lord, I will do this if you provide." And here's the amazing thing. He did provide over and over and over again. And ironically enough, Ron called back a couple of hours later saying the person that he was substituting for actually went into the hospital, and it may be a little bit longer that I would be substitute teaching. Well, it happened to be 3 years. But here's the amazing thing in that group. God really fanned the flame of the gift of teaching in me through that group. They were very patient with me and very loving, and laughed at my jokes, which probably weren't very funny at all. But here's the thing, that I really learned how to teach, very much like what Rich was talking about with preaching. I learned how to do that in that class. And subtle cues of watching how they responded, learning how to ask questions, and all of that was something that really impacted me. Ironically, at the same time, that's when computers were starting to become in vogue in the business place. And what I did at Nordstrom is I would actually have my secretary print out the emails. I would handwrite, and she would type. Well, as I was teaching, I would have Sherry type out my notes because I couldn't read them either. And here's the amazing thing is that I learned how to use a computer from that particular time. And what I'm doing now is that I'm actually a pastor at our church for small groups, and I'm writing study guides each week. And a lot of that came from what I learned here at Knott Avenue. I'm also the administrative dean for a small school, and so I'm teaching college students right now. And it's just amazing the impact. And who would have known that it actually started from a phone call? But God knew that. And the impact is just something that's felt and made so much of a difference in my life. And I thank God day in and day out for the work that's been done here.
Well, I am so excited to be here. Every time I am here, I love this church. I love being here. I can't tell you enough. I came to Knott Avenue Christian Church, and I was in college. I was a college guy, and I actually went to church when I was younger, but I went to the Catholic church. So one day, a guy named Dave Verdesia, my best friend at the time, invited me to this church. He said, hey, we have church on Sunday morning. I go, I can't come Sunday morning. He goes, well, we have church in the afternoon. I go, I can't come in the afternoon. Well, we have church at night, too. And I go, whoa, you guys, man, you guys do church a lot, you know? So anyway, I came on a Sunday night. I remember I sat right over here before the expansion, you know, so I was sitting right over there. And I was this Catholic guy, and I was blown away because there was, you know, long pews and stuff like that. And I remember people got up who didn't have robes, and they just started talking and doing stuff. And I thought, wow, that's kind of weird, you know. And people were talking back and forth. And it was the best experience of my life. And so much of who I am as a person has to do because of this church and the people who invested in me. I love the church so much that I came in as a college guy, and I heard this pastor who had this gravelly voice and wore wingtips all the time, you know, and he didn't say naked, he said naked, and I couldn't figure out what, you know, he's just weird stuff. And I always wanted to clear my voice for him, you know, but so one day he gave an invitation, I came forward, and I got baptized. I got baptized right over there, and it was the greatest thing. And I just wanted to be around the church so much, I thought, and Ron had been here, and he had just left, and there was another guy named Mike Fields who's a youth pastor, and he started talking to me, and he taught me a lot about not to take yourself too seriously. He was always laughing, and I loved that about life. But I decided, you know, I was a football coach and wanted to teach, and I said, instead of doing that, I'd like to be involved in ministry in some way. And I said, I'll do anything to be around ministry. So I was talking to Floyd, and I said, is there anything I could do? How can I be around more? And he said, well, you know, we have a position as janitor that's open. And I go, I'll take it. So I became the janitor here. It was awesome. Two things I hate still today is glitter and popcorn. I just hate it. Hate it. So to all children's ministers, don't ever use glitter and popcorn for the sake of the janitor. But I loved it here. It's where I was called to ministry here at Knott Avenue Christian Church. One day I was here, and all of a sudden, I was sitting over here again, and all of a sudden this girl walked down the aisle. And I go, oh, whoa. And it ended up being this girl who ended up being my wife. And I remember I saw her, and I go, oh my gosh. I didn't remember anything the rest of the day that was talked about. But we got married here. And then not only did we get married here, our oldest daughter, Amy, got married here. This church is so special to us. But I've got to say this, the most important thing is that this church is not about the CE building, the pepper tree, you know, the building it out, and the fellowship hall, and all the things that I look at are so special. This church is special because of the people. The people who invested in me, from Ron Gallagher to Mike Fields, to Carl Dupre, to Randy Mayer, to Bob Moore, to elders and staff like that. I remember Gary Olsby teaching all the time about the Bible. It made such an impression upon us that they would, and not only did they teach, but they just lived their lives in a way that I understood as a Christian man the way I was supposed to live. And then there was this guy who, with that gravelly voice and those wingtips, who did nothing but preach the gospel. And if I had anything to say to you at Knott Avenue is recognize that Success is not about the building. It's not how many buildings you have or how big you get. It's nothing like that. It's that you are called to be God's people, to reach out to other people and be an influence to other people for the kingdom of God. That's what Knott Avenue did for me. It's not the place, it's the people. And I just pray that I'll continue for another 60 years.
Thank you, brother. By the way, Dave, that position you had is better called the Minister of Maintenance. So just keeps it spiritual that way. Well, you've heard it talked about this pushing out the building and expanding the building. And those seem to be some golden memories around here at Knott Avenue, because the church was growing and they needed to do something to expand this and to double the seating capacity in here. So in 1986, in June, they broke ground to begin to add on these wings, as they called them. And they had to figure out where they were going to meet, because they couldn't meet in here. And so beginning in August of that year, well, especially with guys like Ron and Stan and people around, a circus tent seemed appropriate. And so they got hold of a circus tent and they put it in the parking lot and they began to meet there. They did life there. People met there on Sundays. Weddings were done there, all kinds of stuff. Now, the church had anticipated being back in here for Christmas. They made it back in here in May of the next year. But I can tell you this, the story, because that's long before I got here, but the stories I've heard make it sound like it was 9 years in here, not 9 months. I mean, in that tent, and it was all good. Stan Endicott was the music minister during that time. Stan actually spent over 25 years here at Knott Avenue, and I know he has a ton of juicy stories, especially about Ron, but we asked him specifically to talk about those tent times during that. So Stan, would you please come?
Oh, the stories. I could tell you some great stories. Back in the back on the wall, you'll see the pictures of the tent. And if you could just picture this, you know, when we opened this place up, just a regular old church building that had this roof all the way through it. And I remember they just ripped out, so there was a back half of this building still standing and the front half of this building still standing, and you could see through the sky the rest. And so decided to put up the tent. And the thing that I have learned so much about that was what an amazing season of risk-taking it was. Because we stood a chance to lose some people. We stood a chance that it would be such a huge distraction that it would do more harm than good. We just didn't know. But Floyd led the way and had the faith, as well as the leadership of our church, to do that. And the funny thing is, I totally forgot this until I saw it tonight. We put pews in the tent. Now, pews are those long benches where your kids can take naps during the sermon. But there were pews in there, I forgot. But Betty, there's probably not two people in ministry that are more opposite than me and Floyd. I mean, come on, Betty, you know. And Floyd and I had so much fun. We used to go, anybody remember Arnold's Farmhouse over by Knott's Berry Farm? That's what I'm talking about, yeah. They didn't serve any sushi over there, okay? But Connie, stand up and say hello, honey. Come on, stand up, okay. So we would, every Sunday, Betty, we'd go to Arnold's Farmhouse, and it was so awesome. But after Betty, I don't know if you know this or not, but Floyd was baptized twice. Did you know that? He was baptized the first time whenever he came to Christ as a young boy, young man. And the second time was in the tent on a rainy weekend. There was a big, huge buckets, hundreds of buckets of water that had fallen on top of the tent, and Floyd thought if he would just take a broom and just push up on it, that it would be fine. And
Betty, that was his second baptism. Yeah. Now, the other thing that Floyd, after we got in this building, you know, where's Joe? Where's Joe? Worship Joe. Is he in this room? He's not here? Be sure and mark him off for that. Well, I told Floyd, I said, we want to start having drums in our worship service. And I know that Floyd took a deep breath and he goes, well, so he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll put them over there as far as you can put them over there. And you got to keep them quiet. So what I did was every month I moved them 6 inches further to the center, and it took about a year. But I tell you this much, Floyd does wear wingtips, but Floyd is willing to take, he was so willing to take risks. And it was incredible. There was one Sunday at Christmas time, there were a lot of policemen here. And we couldn't, I was already home. We lived over in Cyprus. And a neighbor said, what's all the police doing at the church? And I go, I don't know. So I came over here. And one of the things I love about my time at Knott Avenue, basically, Paul, I don't know if you've learned this yet or not, but this place is filled with a bunch of crazy misfits. And it's always been that way. And that's the reason we have so many great stories of crazy misfit people falling in love with Jesus. Can I tell you? It was so awesome. But this particular day, this person got in a four-wheeler and started doing donuts in the parking lot and drove his four-wheeler through that back wall and came right here and crashed right there in front of the stage. Anybody remember that? It's a true story. Not all my true stories are true. But everything I know about ministry, I learned here, and I'm so grateful. One story on Ron. I would get here early to set up for music and the band or the choir or whatever, and Ron was over there setting up chairs. And now Ron will not admit this. I'm just telling you, but it's true. It was an early Sunday morning, about 7:30, and he was setting up chairs, and I knew that he was supposed to preach that day. And I said, Ron, looking forward to hearing you preach today. He totally forgot that he was supposed to preach, and he had this look of, oh my gosh. So he went home and brushed off some youth ministry sermon. Ron, you know it's true. But Joe Vaughn, where's Joe Vaughn? Joe, how many times have we had milkshakes over at Troy's, you know? I'm telling you, the people, the leadership of this place. And now, Paul, dude, it's your turn to do this. What an awesome opportunity for you. I love this place so much. Every square foot of this place, I have an amazing, fun memory. Our 3 kids all love God, and they all love the local church because of their experience here. I'm so blessed to be back tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. When leadership does its job in a church, and in a church like Knott Avenue, ministry begins to flourish. And one of those areas where ministry began to really grow and flourish here was in women's ministry. And Lorraine Dupre was called to become what would be the very first women's ministry director in the Christian churches in the United States. And at one point, she had nearly 400 women serving in different ministry teams under her. And so her influence spanned more than 5 decades here at this church. And I just want you to know, when I came on staff in 2000, I asked Lorraine to be my ministry assistant. And she said, sure, that would be great. And a couple of staff members took me aside, I won't say who they are, and they said, would you just check and make sure that Lorraine hasn't lost a step? I came back to them a little while later and I said, I just want you to know, not only has she not lost a step, I had to ask her to slow down a step so I could keep up with her. And so, Lorraine Dupre, would you please come and talk to us about women's ministry?
obviously I've lost a little step since then. But this is a question why do I have to follow Stan Endicott? Why is that? I have to bring my teleprompter because if I don't do this in 4 minutes, he's going to throw that bottle of water on me. And I think Stan stole some of my time. But at any rate, my husband Carl and I and our 4 children came to Knott Avenue in 1972, so 44 years ago. We first got involved in the junior high program because my son Brad was a junior higher in those days. And a lot of those people are my 50-year-old friends on Facebook now, and literally all over the world. But it was in 1981, the decade of the 80s, that the Lord put a burden on my heart to start a women's ministry here at Knott Avenue. So I got all of my courage together, my ideas, my plans, and I went into Floyd Strader to present him my ideas and began to babble. And he slowed me down and said, you know, the elders were thinking about starting a women's ministry here, and we were thinking about you leading it for us. And I thought, shoot, if I'd have waited, you know, just a little while, they'd ask me instead of me going through all this trembling. But the Lord knew that I needed to own that ministry, that I needed to have it for my very own, maybe suffer a little for it. So we contacted all the women in the church to become active in some kind of a volunteer ministry. The idea was to spread the joy around so that a few people weren't doing all the work and the blessings could be spread. This program provided a way to activate women and to get them to buy in, to take ownership in the church. When you do service in the church, you think, this is my church, and I want to serve this church. Our goal was to enlist every woman in the church family to find a spiritual growth and service. We sent out a brochure at the first of every year with a list of ministries women could be involved in, with a chairman over every ministry so that she could tend to her little flock. Beside the usual kitchen and baptism communion, we enjoyed serving at weddings, and I just got to do a caveat here. I did a wedding for Dave Krause, and Danny was back in the bride's room getting ready. He wanted to see the bride before the wedding, and so we took him back there, and he says, oh my gosh, I'm marrying Barbie. I don't know if you still remember that, but I do. So it's at these things such as weddings and funerals that we would run into unchurched people. People had no church home, that, you know, maybe they're here for a new mom's luncheon, or maybe they're here for a funeral. So we were able to witness for Christ, and many, many of these women came back to join the church here and to get involved. The Lord blessed the ministry, and there was a great growth period at Knott Avenue during this time. And so I was invited to North American Christian Convention with my ideas and ministry. I conducted workshops there for 3 years running, and many of those churches took the ideas home and implemented them at their churches. KACC is very near and dear to me. I spent 4 decades of my life here. All 4 of my children were married in this sanctuary. My son Brad was ordained to the ministry right here somewhere. My husband Carl's funeral was in this room. And at this age and stage of my life, I recently placed my membership at Eastside Christian Church, which is only 5 minutes away from me. It's better that I keep off the freeway, I'll tell you. But at any rate, I think of you all. I love you all. I pray for you continually. I rejoice in the progress that's being made here under the direction of Pastor Paul, leading the group here. And I just encourage you to keep up the good work that God started here 60 years ago. 60 years ago. Long time.
Thank you so much. Well, as the 20th century was coming to a close, leadership here began to realize that the neighborhood didn't look like it used to, and people didn't look like they used to. And there was a need to reach out cross-culturally in ways that perhaps they hadn't before. So in 1999, there was the launch of a Spanish ministry which would grow into a Spanish-speaking congregation. And we have a video that we want to share with you now about the birth and growth of that work.
Bueno, el ministerio tuvo comienzos en el año 1999, creo que fue julio, agosto, por ahí. Yo vine aquí ya en agosto invitada por mi hermana y en ese tiempo el grupo nomás era de 3 personas. Era Eugenia Torres, su mamá y su hermana Mónica y el pastor, obviamente. Y ya mi hermana y yo pues ya era un grupo de 5. Y Ruth, que vivía al lado, ella también se congregaba, entonces era un grupo prácticamente de 5 personas estables por un tiempito. Fuimos creciendo poco a poco y hasta ese tiempo estábamos en el salón 2-6 arriba del otro lado y fue creciendo, crecimos tanto que luego nos mudamos al salón social y iba creciendo igual. Tomamos algunas alternativas para evangelizar yendo al Swami de Cypress y digo que no fue un fracaso total porque digamos que de algunos tratados 2-3 personas venían. Y también lo hacíamos en el estacionamiento de las tiendas aquí alrededor. Y el tiempo pasó, fue creciendo y nos quedamos un tiempo en el salón social, algunas veces en unos módulos y para el 2001 ya estamos en el santuario. En el 2002, agosto del 2002, llega Gil García con su esposa Alejandra y él comenzó a liderar el ministerio en español hasta el 2008, creo, 2008. En el tiempo del liderazgo del hermano Gil fuimos a una misión a Tecate a trabajar a una construcción para una casa de huérfanos y fue emocionante, fue una experiencia muy bonita. Y luego el pastor Gil estaba siempre como líder en ese tiempo y se va él y queda Jerry y su esposa Nadie liderando el mismo ministerio. Hasta hoy es el mismo ministerio en español que estamos actualmente aquí en el santuario.
But the impact of ministry would not be confined to Knott Avenue itself or even its immediate neighborhoods, but we begin to fan out and move out into all the world. Some of the adults that were here, younger and older, were sensing God's call to literally go into all the world and to make disciples. Global ministries became a greater focus in the life of the church, and it was exemplified by couples like Jeff and Christy Wilkie. Jeff and Christy were products of this church, and they learned that God had expectations of them that could ultimately take them to the farthest reaches of our globe. They joined YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and eventually became directors of one of the training facilities, which is in Montana. Jeff and Christy wanted to share a word with you via video about their thankfulness to Knott Avenue for all that they gave to them.
Happy anniversary, Knott Avenue Christian Church, 60 years, congratulations. Wish we could be there with you, but we're Jeff and Christy Wilkie, and we are with Youth with a Mission up in Lakeside, Montana. And we just want to say thank you for how Knott Avenue has greatly impacted our lives. There's been so many ways through the years, and we're so grateful for how you guys have invested in us.
And one of the ways I can think of is my family moved to Knott Ave in 1972, so ever since I could barely walk, I've been a part of that church, been a part of that fellowship, and been invested in by so many Sunday school teachers and in youth group by Derek Lauer especially. He just really took time to invest in me, and then later by Ron Gallagher, he really poured into us.
Yeah, thanks Ron for how you have personally invested in us and impacted our lives. We're so grateful for how you've helped us understand our call to missions.
And another big area for me was that Knott Avenue was really instrumental in encouraging me to be further equipped in ministry and attend Pacific Christian College. So Knott Avenue was a big part in supporting my studies there and helping me get equipped for ministry and into missions eventually.
Thanks also for just supporting us in every phase of life. I think from salvation, I was baptized at Knott Avenue Christian Church November 28th, 1984, and Christy was baptized there when she was younger, and just being called into missions, equipped. We were married at Knott Avenue Christian Church April 10th, 1992, and launched into missions and encouraged and supported and just incredibly blessed as a family. So we just really want to thank you so much for how you guys have impacted our lives. And made it possible for us to impact the lives of so many more. We've had thousands come through that we've helped train and disciple, not only here in Montana, but also throughout the nations that we've gone to. So thank you so much for your investment in us.
60 years, that's quite an accomplishment. And for us, we are proud to be a part of the heritage of Mount Avenue Christian Church. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Shortly after I left here in 2012 to begin work with Oasis Community, Knott Avenue called a young man to work with their college-age and young adult ministry. Now, Paul, what you didn't know was the church already had a history of elevating and moving guys from youth ministries into senior ministry positions. And so it worked once, so they figured, let's do it again. So Paul is going to come now as our senior pastor here, and he is going to talk about the next phase of life as I pass him that baton.
Well, thank you again for being here. You know, these stories have been so impactful to me, you know, just coming on and kind of seeing 60 years of those highlight moments. You know, the top 10, if you will, God's Sports Center of Knott Avenue Christian Church has been something so moving to me to see the baton pass from generation to generation. And I think what we've seen and we've looked at through the videos and through people coming on stage is Knott Avenue Christian Church has always felt the burden that Jesus Christ talked about when he looked at the world and said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers. Well, Knott Avenue Christian Church, just even that story we heard, when a boy looks in and sees his dad with a bunch of men praying, they're praying, God, send out workers into this great harvest. But not only do we pray for that, we also send out people. And oftentimes what happens is staff people who are here, who are serving the local congregation, feel a burden and feel a call to go and do mission work. And we've got a great video of Matt and Jessica Welchel, how they felt God calling them to a foreign land. So they are not here from Japan, but they are with us in video. So let's watch that video together as they explain how God moved on their hearts as they were here at Knott Avenue Christian Church.
Hello, Knott Avenue Christian Church. Greetings from Osaka, Japan, and happy anniversary.
Yay! It was 2011. At that time, I had been the worship pastor at Knott Avenue Christian Church for 5 years. And Knott Avenue offered a perspectives course. And that was a class that really taught about God's plan for reconciliation and redemption from the Old Testament until today. And it showed how we could be a part of that incredible story.
Matt took this class and he quickly learned how God has been moving globally, how the global church has responded, and what the greatest needs in evangelism are today. It was through that class that we first learned that Japan was, at that time, the largest unreached people group in the world. It still remains the second largest unreached people group, with missionaries decreasing by 30% in the last few decades.
Soon after the Perspectives course, Knott Avenue did a whole sermon series through a book called Live Life on Purpose. It encouraged everybody to get into a small group to study the book together.
This book and this series focused on how, through a true understanding of the Great Commission, we can know how to live and we can know how to be a part of advancing the truth throughout the ends of the earth.
Separately and completely unexpectedly, God prompted the both of us to pray for Japan.
And it was just a few weeks later that Matt turned on the TV and we joined the rest of the world in grieving over the effects of the tsunami earthquake that hit Japan in 2011.
We knew we needed to do something, and Knott Avenue Christian Church felt the same way. We took up a special offering of thousands of dollars to send to a church called Mustard Seed Christian Church in Osaka, Japan. They're taking weekly trips to the disaster area to bring food, Bibles, and offer prayer to the victims of the disaster.
Knott Avenue also took 2 short-term mission trips to Japan to help local churches with their outreach and ministry opportunities here. And it was through those trips that it became very clear that here in Japan the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few.
Both of us felt confirmation from the Lord that He wanted us to serve full-time in Japan, but both of us also knew that our spouse, the other person, would never go for it because it's crazy, right?
But that verse I just mentioned earlier goes on to say, ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send workers into His harvest field. So that's exactly what we did. We prayed that God would send workers, never anticipating that God's answer to that prayer would be, you go.
We had great jobs in California, a lovely house, friends and family nearby. So why would we give all that up to go be missionaries in Japan? Really, because nothing is better than being smack in the middle of the will of God. Maybe God is calling you to sell everything and move across the world. Maybe He isn't. But one of the things that can't be denied is that God is calling us all to do something that will forward the mission of His kingdom in the world.
Let's answer the call, because it's glorifying to God and it's the only thing that we can do to be able to satisfy our souls.
Move from being a passive churchgoer to an active mission follower.
One of the main benefits of being a part of a local church is that it prepares us on Sunday to go out the rest of the week and share the truth that we know.
Knott Avenue Christian Church is our home church. It's our sending church. You have been along every step of the way, supporting us financially, spiritually, and emotionally.
Through Knott Avenue, we've been able to serve in Osaka, Japan for 3 years now. And in that time, we've seen dozens of Japanese people be reconciled to Christ. We've seen our church double in size. We've been a part of helping another church plant start out of mustard seed in the city of Kobe as well.
Thank you, Knott Avenue Christian Church, the church body, the ruggedly handsome pastoral staff and eldership.
You love us well so that we can love others well.
Happy anniversary! We're celebrating with you.
Well, it's great to hear when people are here and God moves on their heart. And as that was happening with Matt and Jessica, it was also happening with one of our other staff members. And it was a little different, instead of feeling a burden to go to a foreign land, this person felt the burden to go to a different culture in their homeland. And this move wouldn't just send a godly couple to another spot, but we would send leaders, we would send servants, we would send members, we would send great people to go to be a part of this church plant. And the church plant we're talking about is Oasis Community Church, and it's a great church. There you go. The rowdy group that's over there, that's them. The ones playing Angry Birds on their phone right now as we speak. Just kidding, that's not them. No, but Mike is going to come up. He's going to share how God really moved on his heart during a similar time right now when Matt and Jessica shared of how when God moved on him to reach the Muslim culture right here in our local area. So Mike, would you come back up again and share with us a little bit?
When I started on staff here in 2000, I was working with the marginalized and homeless in our community, but also with our global endeavors around the world. But by the end of the decade, some of us had discovered a very place that was very different, yet very near to us. And that was Little Arabia, which is less than 4 miles from here, mostly along Brookhurst Street between Ball Road and La Palma. And that place has lots of restaurants and stores and hookah lounges and all those kind of good things. And we started spending time there in the restaurants. And because some of us were designed for restaurant evangelism. We were made that way. And we began to get to know some of the owners and talk to them about Jesus and realized that many of them had not really ever talked to somebody about who Jesus is from a biblical perspective. And they had lived here 15, 20, 25 years. So we realized quickly that that wasn't their fault, that's our fault. And the more time we spent there getting to know people, the more burdened I became. And so we began to pray, God, what's the craziest way we could reach out and do something of significance in that area? And then God gave me this verse, one that you all know very well. But He gave it to me in the Message version. That is a paraphrase. John 1:14. And in the Message it says this, "And the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood." Well, that was the answer. You're supposed to move into the neighborhood. Now, it's not like I didn't know that. I'm just not sure I wanted to do that. But that was the answer. And we knew that that's what we needed to do, to become good news so that we could share good news. Well, after a lot of prayer and confirmation with my wife Liz, because this would be the second time we did something kind of off our charts, I went to Shane Womack, who was our senior pastor at the time. And I thought it would probably take a couple of sit-downs to convince him, but I knew Shane really was, evangelism is important, church planting is important, and it took 10 minutes. And he said, let's do this. And we went over there and we drove around and we inspected things. We went to one of the mosques and we talked with people. And then he said, I want you to go talk with each of the elders individually and see what they say. Well, to be honest with you, I fully expected our elders to be enthused, but that there would be a lot of yes buts in the response. But you know what? There wasn't one. Each elder I spoke with was more excited than the previous one. And by the end of that time, we knew what we needed to do. And so in February of 2012, we preached, talked about it, began to invite people to informational meetings, and ended up with a group initially of about 60 that met in here every Monday night. At least we started in here. And we began to talk about what it meant, what it would mean to be a church in that area of our city. And then, as we incubated that new church, we began to grow together and become closer with each other. On October 14th, 2012, we launched that church with about 40 core workers who committed themselves to be with us for 1 year. Most from Knott, some from other places. Well, 4 years later, fewer than 20 of those original 40 are still with us. But we're averaging between 80 and 110 people on any given Sunday. This church invested its leaders, its members, and its finances for us. And I just want you to know, because I don't know that we've ever talked about it, but that in the course of 2 years and 3 months, you graced us with a total of about $145,000. That's what it cost to plant this church. That's a lot of money, but I want you to know that I'm with a church planting group that's working up in LA, and every church plant that they put together, they invest between $300,000 and $350,000. So you guys figured out a model that works very, very well. Since the beginning of 2014, we have been self-supporting, and God continues to bless the giving, the leadership, and the outreach of the church. We've learned so much about being a church in our 4 years together. We've seen one young Muslim man give his life to Jesus and be baptized. And he was with us for a while, and then he dropped off the radar. But I can tell you, we have multiple and so many contact points, relationships, talking opportunities with Muslims in the communities. And so many of our people are out there trying to connect, trying to make friends, and make a difference in the lives of people there. Listen, this ministry is a challenge. We live in a culture that wants microwave experiences. We happen to choose a crock pot work. And so pray for us. Pray for us in this. Pray for courage and expanded opportunities to share the truth. Pray for open hearts and open minds. Pray for relationships to be built so that we can share the gospel in a very organic and natural way. Pray for our leaders and our future leaders of the church. And pray that in the midst of a specific focus, like reaching into the Middle Eastern community, that we'll learn how to be a church that effectively reaches everyone who is broken and looking for hope. Thank you, Knott Avenue. Thank you for all that you've done to make Oasis Community what it is and what it's yet to become. God bless you guys.
Thanks, man. Well, this calling isn't unique. The calling on Matt and Jessica, the calling on Carmen's, the calling on all the people that you've heard there, it's not unique. This calling is shared for all of us. You know, the passage at the very beginning video was Hebrews 12, and it said, let's run the race that's set before us. Let's run with endurance. Let's throw off the sins that so easily entangle us. Let's fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. But right before that, and oftentimes I think this is what we miss in that passage, it says, because we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. See, it puts the past before it puts the future. Because really what this is, it's a baton. It's a race that we run, and we don't just start and nobody was before us. There was somebody before us, running hard, falling down, getting up, striving, sweating, and they passed the baton to us. What the writer of Hebrews is doing there is he's pulling the readers back to Hebrews chapter 11. He's saying, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, and Hebrews 11 is called the Hall of Faith. It's beautiful. It's like you were going into like an Olympic arena and you saw all the gladiators before, all the stone statues. And this is what the writer of Hebrews did. From Abraham to Moses, men and women of faith, great people who ran the race. And the writer of Hebrews says, because we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let's run. Let's grab the baton, let's reach back, let's look forward, and let's press on to honor the past. Well, you know what we just saw tonight? We saw Knott Avenue Christian Church's Hebrews 11. We saw the Hall of Faith, if you will. We saw the great moments, the funny stories of water coming from tents, right? We saw moments of boys sliding down roofs. We heard about Ron's impromptu messages that I'm sure convicted millions, and many came to be baptized. We saw those great moments, but now we're at another spot. We're at the transition point where the baton is being passed. My question to you is, what will Hebrews 12 look like for us? Who will be the next great men and women of faith? What will be the next great acts of faith done at this church? Moments that we'll look back on and say, these are great markers of the glory of God. I think those great men and women are right here in this room. I think it's you. And I think what God has for us, great moments, great activities, great leaps of faith will be done soon in the next 5, 10, 15, 20, even 60 years. So church, this is what I want to do. I'm going to call our pastors and our elders to come forward at this point. Joe's got a song for us. This is what we're going to do. We pass the baton to you. So what's going to happen during this song is I want you to sing this song with a commitment in your heart, with a recognition of what God has done in the past, kind of that Hebrews 11 type mentality. Let's remember the great work that God has done. But let us also see this as an opportunity to take a transition, to have that baton passed to us. So what I ask you to do, if you're up to the challenge, you hear the footsteps behind you, and you start to run, you start to try to keep the same pace as the runner just behind you. As you stretch out your hand, would you take the challenge to grasp the baton being passed to you by great men and great women of faith telling you to stretch, to strive, to move forward, to take on the crazy challenges? If that's you, I ask you and your family to come up and receive a baton during this song. Just one per family, and then you could take it and go back to your seat. You're going to have the whole song to think about this. I don't want you to take this challenge lightly. So as we sing, maybe it's a time for you to contemplate, a time to pray. A time for you to sit back and say, what are my reservations about the future? What are my reservations about stepping forward? What are my reservations about accepting this challenge? And when you feel honestly in your heart, you can say, yeah, I'm willing to stretch out my hand. I'm willing to look forward and reach back and honor the past and the great men and women of faith who have come before. When you feel that God has confirmed that in your heart, grab one of these batons. Again, just come up anytime during the song and grab it from one of our elders. Church, I invite you to stand and let's sing in recognition of the past, celebrate what God has done, but also with an idea that we're going forward. And any time during the song, feel free to come forward and grab a baton, one per family, and then go back to your seat. Church, let's worship and let's take the challenge.
The weak say I have strength by the Spirit of power that raised Christ from the dead. Let now the poor stand and confess that my portion is Him, and I'm more than blessed. Let now our hearts burn with a flame, a fire consuming all for your Son's holy name. And with the heavens we declare, you are King, Lord. We Let now your church shine as your bride that you saw in your heart as you offered up your life. Let now the lost be welcomed home by the saved and redeemed, those adopted as your own. We are your own, Jesus. Let now our hearts burn with a flame, a fire consuming all for your Son's holy name. And with the heavens we declare, you are our King, you alone, Jesus. We love you, Lord. We worship you. You are our God. You alone are good. You asked your Son to carry this, the heavy cross, my weight of sin. So I love you, Lord. I worship you. Hope which was lost now stands renewed, and I give my life to honor this, the love of Christ, the Savior King. So I love you, Lord, and I worship you. Hope which was lost, oh, and now stands renewed. I give my life, I give my life, oh, I give my life to honor this, the love of Christ, the Savior
As you stay standing, you know, I don't know what opportunities or all the opportunities that God's going to give us. But I know that you're going to seize those opportunities. You know, even for the short time that I've been here, this is a church that takes on challenges. This is a church that takes the Great Commission seriously. And so I can't tell you how excited I am to run this race with you. Now, you may be here and you may be thinking, you know, Paul, I kind of want an opportunity to give an anniversary gift. If that's in your heart, we made room for that. There's a card in the seat back in front of you. There's a card there. You'll see. You can include that if you'd like. We want you to know there's no deficit. There's no nothing to be made. But as we look forward in the future, we've got some big projects we want to take on. We finished one half of our parking lot. We want to do the other side. We also want to make a more secure system for our child care check-in and Sunday mornings because the kids are important to us. So I want you to know if you give any gift, you put in that envelope, put in the offering boxes that are out, the blue or black boxes with the blue sign there. If you want to give that, 100% of the funds that you give tonight as an anniversary gift will go to the parking lot and to purchasing and the execution of a secure system for our child care Sunday morning programming. Now, again, 2016, I can't tell you how excited I am. It's going to be a good year. It's going to be a great year because I believe the God who's given us 60 is the God who's going to give us 60 more. Now, you know, if you've been here on a Sunday morning, we like to end our service off in the same way. And that's with the blessing for the road. It's fun to be together. It's fun to share stories. It's fun to worship. Fun to be challenged. Fun to take a wooden stick that you can bludgeon somebody with when you leave church. Please don't, yes. But you know, the hard part is to go out, right? It's to live in our culture as it slips away from the things centered on Christ and to obey. So we want to give you a blessing for the road as you go. We're going to do a little different. Your hand's not going to be empty this time. But if you want to participate in this blessing, would you extend your baton towards me as I extend my baton towards you? Not Avenue Christian Church family. Brothers and sisters in Christ, there are many great men who have gone before us. There are many great women who have run the race before us. And they have done great things, but there are many things for us to still do, and I know that you'll run with us. May God bless you. You are sent from this service.